Amil and the After is a work of historical fiction set in 1948 after the Partition of India. Written for middle-grade readers, the story is told through the eyes of a 12-year-old Amil as it deals with the trauma of being forced to leave his home and faces the challenge of creating a new life. Hi, I'm Dan Scunner, and welcome to the Kids Bookshelf. Ahead, we'll explore the book, and I'll talk with the author about the inspiration behind it. I requested and was provided with a copy of the book, but this video is not sponsored. Veera Hiranandani is the author of the Newbery Honor winning The Night Diary. Her other books include The Whole Story of a Half Girl and How to Find What You're Not Looking For. She joins us to talk about Amil and the After, which picks up where The Night Diary left off. Veera, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, this novel and the previous novel, The Night Diary, was set in the aftermath of the Partition of India. And for those who may not be familiar with that event in history and to put those novels in context, explain to us what happened during the partition.
Sure. So in 1947, actually at midnight between August 14th and August 15th, India became independent from British rule, but also split into two countries, what we know now as Pakistan and India. So new borders were drawn, but it really ignited an enormous amount of conflict along religious lines, mainly between the two largest religious groups in India, Hindus and Muslims. So in the sort of following days and months, millions of people left their homes because they suddenly weren't safe where they were during all of the kind of uprising of conflicts and fighting. And about 7 million people had to leave their homes. About 7 million Muslims had to leave their homes and go over the border into Pakistan. And about 7 million Hindus and non-Muslims had to go over the border in the other direction over the new border of India. And my father's family was one of those families. So that's a huge reason why I've been looking into this history and writing about it.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, actually, is because I know your family experienced this. And I was curious about how you were able to draw upon that experience to inform your novels.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I had a curiosity about what happened during partition and India's independence because I had heard stories growing up from my father and my aunts and uncles. Sadly, my grandparents died before I was born, so I was never able to talk to them and learn more about their experience. But when my father would tell the story when I was very young, I think he was sort of protecting me in the sense of the full details of everything that happened during that time. But I heard that something happened and it wasn't safe for them to stay anymore. And he was just told by his parents to pack a bag. And the next day or two, they had to leave. And they got on a train and they did make it over the border safely. And then they had to start over in Jodhpur. They had a relative find them a very small one-room apartment. And this was about 6 people living there in a one-room apartment at first. And they slowly had to rebuild their lives. And then a few years later, they ended up in Bombay, now called Mumbai. So that's part of the reason why I set Amil and the After in Mumbai. The earlier novel, The Night Diary, was in Mirprakash, where they left, and then they went to Jodhpur in that novel. And then I take us to Mumbai because that's actually the area of India I'm most familiar with and have visited the most.
Well, this second novel is a sequel, and we have Amil in 1948 dealing with the trauma of losing his home and having to create a new life. So tell us about the plot. What's the story people are going to find here?
Sure. And you can technically read Amil and the After on its own. I think it works better as a pair because it just gives you much more of a richer understanding of the characters and the world. But I do include some sort of summary, a little bits of summary of where they were before when Amil and the After starts. But we find this family and this story is through Amil's point of view. His twin sister Nisha was the main character in The Night Diary. And we find him in this new apartment in Bombay/Mumbai, um, knowing that he is safe and he has a family who loves him, and they're starting a new school, and they're kind of just figuring out this new big bustling city. And so he's aware that he's lucky. But he also feels a lot of sadness and loss and confusion and loneliness. He doesn't have any friends. And he feels just really isolated. And he's also not sure about the world anymore. He's sort of lost trust in the world at this point. And he's not sure if it is actually safe. And so he and Nisha kind of talk about this in the beginning of the story. And she suggests that he expresses himself in some way, gets some of his feelings out. And he's not much of a writer. He wouldn't want to keep a journal. He finds writing difficult for a number of reasons, but he loves to draw. So she suggests that he keep a drawing journal for their mother, who's no longer living. Their mother died during childbirth. So they both never knew their mother. And they want to sort of know her in some way or communicate. And so he starts this drawing journal, and that kind of sets him up for the next few months as he goes to school and tries to make friends. He wishes so much for a bicycle in the beginning of the book, because that's sort of, I always thought about a bicycle as kind of this symbol of childhood freedom. And he sees a boy on a bike in the beginning, and he just sort of locks into that image of this boy kind of just riding on his own bike. And it's really this expression of him just wanting this kind of simple childhood freedom that he doesn't feel like he has. And then eventually he does connect with somebody, but it is a character that is having a much harder time. So that kind of sets the story in another direction of what do they do? What is our responsibility to kind of help others that are having a harder time, even if we're also struggling?
Well, as you mentioned, he does these drawings. So in the book, we see those drawings. Tell us a bit more about those illustrations.
Yeah, I'm really excited about them because I did not do them. And they're, of course, in the book, they're meant to be Amil's drawings that he's doing for himself. And they sort of progress over the course of the novel as he becomes more aware of his own drawing skills, and they kind of get more detailed, and his skills increase over the novel. But that's also because it's almost like his own understanding of himself is kind of deepening and increasing. But we needed to hire an illustrator to do them. And I had met an illustrator named Prashant Miranda during my travels when I was touring around for the Night Diary, and I went to a Indian children's festival in Bangalore called the Neve Children's Literature Festival. And I met Prashant there, and he was lovely, and I enjoyed hearing more about his work. And then I looked him up on Instagram because I wanted to see more of his work. And he does these journals, these sort of watercolor, pencil-drawn journals of his own travels. And I hadn't even thought that I was definitely going to write a follow-up to the Night Diary, but I thought these drawings remind me of what I imagined Amil's drawings to be like. And so when I did start the book, I immediately asked if my editor could reach out to him and see if he was available to do the drawings, and the rest is history.
So let's talk a little bit about why you wanted to revisit this family and tell more of this story. What sort of inspired you to do that?
Sure. I wasn't even sure. The Night Diary felt complete to me when I finished it. About a year later, I had spent a lot of time traveling and visiting schools and talking to readers and talking to students who read the book and were interacting with the characters. And they loved Nisha and Amil, and they were really interested in Amil's point of view. They wanted to hear more from his point of view. And they kept asking me, "Are you going to write another book? Why don't you put it in Amil's point of view?" And it's not that the thought never crossed my mind, but the fact that I was hearing readers interested in it made me suddenly just one day think I had to try it and see what happens. And often when I start a book, I'll kind of try out an idea. It's almost like I'm dating my idea before I get really serious. And so I'll write, 20 pages of something. And if I'm not always feeling, energetic and inspired to write something, but if I still feel like I have these questions and I just can't let it go, I keep going to a full draft. So it felt that way to me. But what I really wanted to look at with this story is often stories of any kind of crisis where somebody has to leave their home or survive something very difficult. Often the story, like the Night Diary, ends when, okay, they made it, they survived, it's okay for now. But I was thinking about, so what happens after that? After that immediate, oh my gosh, we survived through the most dangerous part of this. But how do we rebuild our lives? How are we both wounded and strengthened because of the experience? And I wrote this book in the first few years of the pandemic, and I was thinking about the first year and how shocking, and really this collective trauma that we all went through and how difficult it was. And I wanted to explore some of those feelings through this historical perspective, to see this family rebuild and how they are both strengthened and have some leftover trauma of what they've been through. And through a young person's eyes, what would that mean? And what would he think about? And what would he do? And what would he want? And how would he feel? And sort of getting into the nuance of some of those feelings, not just, oh, we made it, now everything's fine. So I tried to show some of that complexity in his world and his drawings and kind of what he's longing for and what he's feeling.
Your main character here, Amil, is 12 years old. So, for what age would you recommend this novel?
Sure. So it's categorized as a middle grade novel, which tends to be the age group of 8 to 12. I would see it a little more like 9 to 12, but I really think of my books as family reads. Multiple generations can read them. During the Night Diary, I had generations, where maybe there was a grandparent and then somebody, my age and then their kids all reading the Night Diary because the grandparent had been affected by the partition. And so I see this story as the same way that it could be read by a young person or an adult. I feel like all my books are from ages 9 to 99. But it is targeted towards that kind of middle school reader or, older elementary school reader.
Now, Amil obviously is dealing with a lot in his life. How would you say that his character grows, or what are the lessons he learns over the course of the book?
Yeah, part of it is that he learns that it's okay to not be okay. I think he's sort of struggling with that, where he tends to be, kind of an active, positive kid, and he sort of just wants, he misses his old life, just kind of hang out with his friends. And so he has to sort of understand that he's dealing with a lot of complex feelings, and he's going to have good days and bad days as he recovers. And I think he also feels like he feels sort of powerless and out of control, but he understands over the course of the novel that through connection, through talking to his sister and finally figuring out how to talk to his father, because his father is a doctor and he's very busy and he's a little cut off emotionally. And it's really hard for Emil to connect to him. So figuring out that, making connections at school, and understanding that even if he's been through some scary things and he doesn't know what the future will hold, to really appreciate the present moments when things are okay, and that he's noticing the good things in his life. And he understands that sometimes you just have to be in that present space and kind of appreciate what you have in the moment. So it's a lot for a 12-year-old kid to kind of manage. And so part of it is showing that the world is unfair for him in a lot of ways. But at the same time, he understands that people are going through a much harder time. They're refugees who don't have anywhere to live, are still dealing with the partition and its after effects. And so he realizes that too. Without, I didn't want to create a character where it's like, oh, I'm just going to realize how lucky I am and that's it. It's like maybe you are luckier than somebody else. So what is your responsibility to that person? Can you do something to help them? And if you can, that's going to empower both of you. So that's something that he feels as well.
And as the readers see Amil going through all of this, what's the takeaway for them? What do you hope that those readers will feel after reading the novel?
Sure. Well, we all go through hard things, some harder than others. But I think that I wanted a young person to feel like it is okay not to be okay. I think that we talk a lot about, especially kind of in this not quite post-pandemic world, but post-early pandemic world, where we talk a lot about kids kind of not doing well in school or being behind or, having a lot more trouble than they used to have or attention issues. And I just feel like, well, yeah, I mean, that's something that's going to happen. And I think we really have to meet kids where they are. And if they're experiencing some of those things, not to kind of enforce, just like keep going and stay positive. We can allow for some space to have some messier feelings and some more struggles. So I would hope a kid who maybe is struggling with whatever they're struggling with, to see Amil do that as well, and find, places where they can be their whole selves, and understand that it is okay, if they have bad days or bad memories or just feel stuck at times.
Veera, you mentioned earlier that you felt that the Night Diary was complete, and at that time you didn't know that there would be a sequel. Do you feel like it's complete now, or is always a possibility that this story might continue?
There is always a possibility. Again, just like the Night Diary, I don't have a set plan, but I'll see what my students bring me and my readers bring me, and I'll see what ideas I have. So never say never.
This middle grade novel is Amil and the After by Veera Hiranandani. Veera, thank you for talking with me today.
Oh, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Now, if you'd like to purchase Amil and the After, I've placed a link for you in the description below. Well, thank you for watching this edition of the Kids Bookshelf. And if you'd like to see more videos about children's books and their authors, be sure to subscribe, like, and click on the bell to be notified about future programs. I'm Dan Scunner. Until next time, keep sharing the gift of reading.